There are some houses that simply exist, and then there are others that breathe. Others that hold secrets within their very timbers, secrets that lie dormant for decades, waiting for the right moment, the right touch, to stir them awake. Our story begins not in a grand, echoing mansion, but in a modest, unassuming home in Willow Creek, a town where the rhythm of life had long settled into a comfortable, almost predictable hum. It was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other's names, where the scent of freshly baked bread lingered in the air on Saturday mornings, and where the most dramatic event was usually a surprise spring shower. But beneath this veneer of quiet normalcy, a tempest was brewing, one that had been quietly gathering its strength behind a peeling sheet of floral wallpaper for nearly 60 years. Elara Vance was a woman of quiet fortitude, her life a tapestry woven with threads of devotion to her family and a deep-seated love for the antique treasures she meticulously restored. At 58, her hands, though showing the delicate tracery of age, possessed an almost uncanny ability to coax beauty back from forgotten objects. Her hair, a striking silver that framed a face etched with both kindness and a hint of an unspoken weariness, was often pulled back in a practical, yet elegant braid. Elara and her husband, Thomas, a man whose gentle humor and steady presence were the anchors of her world, had recently embarked on what they hoped would be their final, most cherished project: the renovation of a charming, if somewhat dilapidated Victorian house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't their dream home in the conventional sense, no sprawling estate or modern marvel, but its bones hummed with history, and Elara, with her innate connection to the past, felt an undeniable pull towards it. It was a property that had sat empty for years, its previous owner, a reclusive old woman named Agnes Pritchard, having passed away without a single known heir. The house had simply waited, silently accumulating dust and untold stories within its walls. The initial days of the renovation were filled with the familiar rhythms of demolition and discovery. Walls came down, revealing layers of paint and wallpaper, each a testament to a different era, a different life lived within those rooms. Thomas, with his practical approach, focused on the structural integrity, while Elara, ever the historian, meticulously peeled back the layers, fascinated by the silent narratives they unveiled. They worked in tandem, a comfortable, unspoken language passing between them as they chipped away at decades of neglect. One sweltering afternoon, as the summer sun beat down relentlessly, casting long shadows through the bare window frames, Elara found herself in what was once, presumably, the master bedroom. The air hung heavy with the scent of aged plaster and forgotten wood. She was tackling a particularly stubborn section of floral wallpaper, its faded roses a ghostly echo of their former vibrancy. The paper, a thick, textured type, seemed to resist her efforts more than usual. Her fingers, accustomed to the delicate dance of restoration, met an unexpected resistance. It wasn't the usual stubborn adhesive. It felt different, more substantial. A faint sense of unease, a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, began to stir. It wasn't a premonition of danger, but rather a feeling of profound mystery, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to uncover something it had guarded for far too long. With a gentle, persistent tug, a larger section of the wallpaper finally gave way, peeling back from the wall with a tearing sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Beneath it, not the expected rough plaster or aged lath, but a small, carefully concealed recess. Her heart gave a sudden, almost painful jolt. It wasn't a cubby for old wires or a forgotten vent. This was clearly an intentional hiding place. Inside, nestled within the dusty confines, lay a single yellowed envelope. Its edges were brittle, its surface mottled with the faint bloom of age, but the script, though faded, was still remarkably clear. Her name, Elara Vance, was written across it in a delicate, almost hesitant hand. A chill, despite the oppressive summer heat, snaked its way down her spine. How could this be? She had never known Agnes Pritchard, had no connection whatsoever to the previous owner of this house. The envelope felt impossibly light, yet its presence was undeniably heavy, laden with an unspoken weight of history and revelation. Her fingers trembled as she carefully extracted the letter from its fragile casing. It was a single sheet of paper, folded precisely in thirds, the ink a faded sepia against the cream-colored stock. The date at the top, barely legible, read November 12, 1965. Her birth year. A cold knot began to tighten in her stomach. This wasn't just some forgotten relic. This felt intimately connected to her, to a past she thought she knew completely. Thomas, hearing the slight gasp that escaped her lips, poked his head into the room, dust clinging to his eyelashes. "Everything all right, Han? You look like you've seen a ghost." Elara could only shake her head, her gaze fixed on the letter. No ghost, Thomas. Something else." Her voice was a bare whisper, barely audible above the distant chirping of cicadas. She held out the envelope, her hand still trembling. Thomas, seeing the unusual gravity in her expression, stepped closer, his brow furrowed with concern. He took the letter from her, his callous thumb gently tracing the faded script of her name. A shared silence descended upon them, thick with unspoken questions. The air in the room, once stale and dusty, now seemed charged with an electrifying tension. The house, which had once felt merely old, now felt ancient, burdened by a story it was finally ready to tell. Elara felt a profound sense of foreboding, a strange cocktail of apprehension and an undeniable surge of curiosity. This letter, tucked away for nearly 6 decades behind a flowered wall, was not just a piece of paper. It was a key to a door she never knew existed, a door that, once opened, might reveal a truth that would shatter the comfortable foundation of her entire life. The first few lines of the letter, written in the same delicate hand as her name on the envelope, were a whirlwind of faded ink and shattering revelation. "My dearest Elara," it began, the salutation sending a tremor through her very core. "If you are reading this, then the passage of time has done its work, and the truth, long buried, has finally found its way to you." The words were formal, yet imbued with a profound sense of urgency, of a burden finally being shed. The author of the letter, it soon became terrifyingly clear, was not Agnes Pritchard, the reclusive old woman who had owned the house. No, the signature at the bottom, though shaky with age, belonged to a name Elara knew intimately, a name that resonated with the deepest part of her being. Her mother, Elara Vance, who had passed away peacefully nearly 20 years ago, taking with her, Elara had always believed, all her secrets. But here, in this dusty, forgotten house, a secret of monumental proportions had just been unearthed. The letter spoke of a past Elara had never known, a shadow history woven into the fabric of her own existence. It was not a story of clandestine affairs or hidden fortunes, but something far more personal, far more profoundly unsettling. It spoke of a difficult birth, a choice made in desperation, and a sacrifice that had haunted her mother for every living moment. The words blurred before Elara's eyes, each sentence a hammer blow to her carefully constructed reality. A brother. She had a brother. Not a stepbrother, not a half-brother, but a full biological brother born moments before her, given away in secrecy, hidden from her from the world, for reasons the letter painstakingly, agonizingly began to explain. The revelation hit her with the force of a physical blow, leaving her breathless, reeling. All these years, her life had been built on a foundation that now felt like quicksand, shifting and dissolving beneath her feet. How could such a monumental secret have been kept from her? How could her mother, a woman she had loved and trusted implicitly, have carried such a burden in silence? The questions swirled in her mind, a chaotic maelstrom of confusion, hurt, and an undeniable, overwhelming curiosity. The letter continued, painting a vivid, heartbreaking picture of the circumstances surrounding her brother's birth. Her mother, young and impoverished, a victim of circumstance and betrayal, had found herself in an impossible situation. The details were stark, brutal even, detailing a world far removed from the comfortable, stable upbringing Elara had always known. It spoke of a desperate time, of choices made out of perceived necessity, of a clandestine arrangement with a family seeking to adopt a child, a family sworn to secrecy. The narrative unfolded like a tragic play, each word meticulously chosen to convey not just facts, but the agonizing emotional weight of a decision that had irrevocably altered multiple lives. Agnes Pritchard, it turned out, was not just the previous owner of the house. She was a friend, a confidant, a silent witness to her mother's profound grief and the secret she carried. This house, this unassuming structure, had been the silent keeper of this agonizing truth, a sanctuary where her mother had occasionally sought solace, revisiting the physical space that held the ghostly echoes of a choice she could never undo. The revelation of Agnes Pritchard's role added another layer of complexity, transforming her from a faceless former owner into a pivotal, if silent, character in this unfolding drama. The letter was a confession, a plea for understanding, a desperate attempt to rectify a decades-old wrong. It was a mother's dying wish, entrusted to the universe, to the chance discovery, to finally reunite what had been tragically torn asunder. Elara felt a peculiar blend of sorrow for her mother's hidden anguish and a burgeoning resentment for the years of silence. But overriding it all was an insatiable hunger for more. Who was this brother? Where was he now? What was his name? The letter hinted at the possibility of a way to find him, a breadcrumb trail meticulously laid out by her mother, a final act of love and atonement from beyond the grave. The quiet house in Willow Creek had just ceased to be merely a renovation project. It had become the starting point of an odyssey, a journey into the uncharted waters of her own family history, a quest to find a forgotten piece of herself. The letter, clutched in Elara's trembling hands, was a living thing, buzzing with the raw energy of unspoken history. Thomas, having read over her shoulder, stood equally stunned, his usually steady presence shaken by the sheer magnitude of the revelation. The silence in the room was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, punctuated only by the frantic beat of Elara's own heart. "A brother?" Thomas finally whispered, his voice hoarse, echoing the disbelief that resonated within her. All this time, he trailed off, the unspoken implications hanging in the air between them. The woman he knew, the woman he loved, the woman who had shared every secret, every joy, every sorrow with him for over 3 decades, now stood revealed to herself as a stranger, incomplete, a puzzle with a vital piece missing. Elara couldn't speak. Her mind raced, sifting through memories of her mother, searching for any hint, any subtle sign she might have missed, any flicker of emotion that would explain this unimaginable secret. Her mother, Eleanor, had always been a private woman, yes, but not secretive, or so Elara had believed. She was warm, nurturing, dedicated. Yet, beneath that gentle exterior, lay a silent, agonizing burden that had shaped her entire life. A burden so profound it could only be unburdened posthumously. The injustice of it all, the decades of lost time, the existence of a sibling she never knew, swelled within her, threatening to overwhelm her. The letter, however, was not just a revelation of pain. It was also a desperate beacon of hope. Her mother, in her final act of love, had left clues, a breadcrumb trail designed to lead Elara to her brother. The letter meticulously detailed the circumstances of the adoption, not with names or addresses, but with fragmented memories, a single, faded photograph, and a recurring motif. A specific lullaby her mother had sung to him, a lullaby Elara herself knew, a simple melody her mother had often hummed without explanation. The photograph, tucked within the folds of the letter, was small, sepia-toned, and heartbreakingly poignant. It showed a tiny infant, barely a few weeks old, wrapped in a crocheted blanket. His eyes, though unfocused, seemed impossibly dark, a startling contrast to the pale softness of his skin. On the back, in her mother's familiar hand, were only 2 words, "My Benjamin, Benjamin." The name echoed in Elara's mind, a new, sacred sound. A name she had never heard, a life she had never known, now brought into existence with the force of a thunderclap. The lullaby, too, was a potent clue. "Sleep, my little dove, the stars are watching above." Her mother had crooned countless times, a melody that always brought a peculiar, bittersweet expression to Eleanor's face. an expression Elara had dismissed as simple wistfulness. Now it was a profound lament, a desperate farewell, a silent promise whispered to a child she was forced to relinquish. The first clue in the letter, beyond the name and the lullaby, was a cryptic reference to a unique, almost whimsical, ceramic birdbath. Her mother had described it in painstaking detail. A robin perched on the edge of a scalloped basin, its beak slightly chipped, its eye a startling shade of blue. It was not a mass-produced item, but a custom piece, commissioned from a local potter. It stood in the yard of the family who took him, the letter explained. A symbol of new beginnings, though my heart was breaking with every flutter of their garden birds. This was not just a detail. It was a distinctive marker, a tangible link to a past shrouded in secrecy. Elara recalled her mother mentioning, years ago, a brief stint working for a wealthy family, not as a domestic, but as a temporary governess for a few weeks, right before Elara was born. The timeline suddenly clicked into place with horrifying precision. This family, the one with the unique birdbath, was likely the one who had adopted Benjamin. Her mother had worked there, not just to earn money, but to be near him, to catch glimpses of the child she had given away, even if only for a fleeting moment. The depth of her mother's silent suffering was now laid bare, a testament to a love so profound it transcended the pain of separation. Their immediate task was clear: find this birdbath. Thomas, ever practical, pulled out his laptop. Willow Creek isn't huge, Elara. If this birdbath was truly unique and commissioned locally, there's a chance someone remembers it, or the potter. They began with online searches for local potters active in the 1960s, cross-referencing with archived business directories. The digital rabbit hole was deep, filled with defunct businesses and forgotten artisans. But Elara's focus was laser-sharp. She wasn't just looking for a potter. She was looking for a specific type of artistry, for something that matched the delicate, almost mournful description her mother had provided. After hours of searching, a name finally surfaced: Rosewood Ceramics, a small, bespoke pottery studio that had operated from 1958 to 1972, run by a reclusive artist named Martha Finch. An old newspaper clipping detailed Martha's passing in the late 70s, and mentioned her studio often took private commissions for garden art. This felt right, too right to be a coincidence. The next step was to find Martha Finch's records. A quick call to the local historical society revealed that Martha's estate had been donated to them, including some of her ledgers and order books. The society, a dusty repository of local lore and forgotten lives, was a treasure trove. The following morning, Elara and Thomas were there, sifting through brittle pages, their eyes scanning for anything related to a ceramic birdbath, a robin, or any name that might align with a family who adopted a child around 1965. The ledgers were meticulous, Martha Finch evidently a woman of order, despite her reclusive nature. They found an entry from early 1965, commissioned birdbath, robin design, chipped beak, blue eye. For the Everett Estate. The name sent a jolt through Elara. The Everett Estate. It was a well-known, sprawling property on the other side of Willow Creek, owned by a prominent old-money family, the Everetts. The same family her mother had briefly worked for as a governess. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with terrifying speed. The Everett Estate was still owned by the same family, though the elder generation had long passed. It was a grand, imposing property, set back from the road behind towering oak trees and a wrought iron gate. Elara felt a surge of apprehension mixed with a powerful, almost desperate hope. What if Benjamin still lived there? What if he was now a man in his 60s, living a life she had been completely unaware of? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. They drove past the estate slowly, their hearts pounding in unison. The old house stood majestic, if a little weathered, its windows reflecting the morning sun. And there, tucked away in a corner of the sprawling front garden, almost obscured by overgrown hydrangeas, was a ceramic birdbath. Its design was unmistakable. A robin, its beak subtly chipped, one eye a striking, almost luminous blue. It was exactly as her mother had described. The confirmation was both a relief and a new wave of dread. They were on the right path, But what would they find at the end of it? Elara knew she couldn't simply knock on the door and demand to know about a son given away 60 years ago. The situation was too delicate, too fraught with potential for pain and misunderstanding. They needed to approach this with caution, with sensitivity. Thomas, ever the voice of reason, suggested they try to find out who currently resided at the Everett estate without directly confronting them. Public records, local archives, anything that could give them a name, a current occupant. They returned home. The image of the birdbath burned into their minds, the weight of the revelation pressing down on them. The internet, a tool her mother could only have dreamed of, would be their next ally. They scoured public records, obituaries, and genealogy sites, searching for any mention of the Everett family, specifically looking for anyone born around 1965, or anyone named Benjamin. The search was painstaking, yielding many false leads and dead ends. The Everett family was large, with multiple branches. The task felt like sifting through grains of sand to find a single, specific pearl. But then, a breakthrough. An old obituary for George Everett, the patriarch of the family, mentioned his passing in the late 1990s and listed his surviving children. Among them, a name that made Elara's breath catch in her throat. His beloved son, Benjamin Everett. The last name was different, as expected, but the first name matched. And the birth date, specifically mentioned in a local historical society entry related to the Everett family tree, was November 12, 1965. Her birthday, not just the same year but the exact same day. The odds of this being a mere coincidence were impossibly, astronomically small. This was him, her brother, Benjamin Everett. The name was no longer a whispered secret in a letter. It was a living, breathing identity. The realization brought a storm of conflicting emotions. Exhilarating joy at finding him, crushing sadness for the years lost, and a profound sense of trepidation about what would happen next. How would he react to this unimaginable truth? Would he embrace her, or would he see her as an unwelcome disruption to a life he had always known? The journey, it seemed, was just beginning, and the path ahead was shrouded in the unknown. The name, Benjamin Everett, hung in the air, a newly spoken truth that resonated with both profound relief and a chilling apprehension. Elara and Thomas sat at their kitchen table, the laptop screen still displaying the obituary, a silent testament to their discovery. The very air seemed to vibrate with unspoken questions. What kind of man was Benjamin Everett? What life had he led, hidden in plain sight, just miles away? The thought of all the years lost, all the moments they could have shared, was a dull ache in Elara's chest, a phantom limb of connection she never knew she was missing. The internet, a boundless ocean of information, quickly became their primary tool in understanding this newly discovered sibling. Benjamin Everett, it turned out, was a well-respected architect in a nearby city, known for his innovative designs and quiet philanthropy. He was married with 2 grown children. His professional biography painted a picture of a successful, stable life, one seemingly untouched by the kind of hidden anguish that had shadowed their mother's existence. There were photographs. A distinguished-looking man in his late 50s, his silvering hair echoing Elara's own, a thoughtful expression on his face, and strikingly, the same dark eyes as the infant in the sepia photograph. It was undeniable. This was Benjamin, her brother, a man she had never known, yet felt an immediate, visceral connection to, a connection forged in shared blood and a devastating, 60-year-old secret. The more they learned about Benjamin, the more complex the situation became. He appeared to be deeply rooted in the Everett family, a family that had raised him as their own. How would this revelation impact them? Would it be seen as a blessing or a betrayal? The potential for disruption, for pain, was immense. Elara wrestled with her conscience, torn between the overwhelming urge to connect with her brother and the profound fear of shattering his carefully constructed reality. Thomas, sensing her turmoil, gently reminded her of their mother's intention. She didn't just want you to know about him, Elara. She wanted you to find him. She put this in motion for a reason. For them. His words were a balm, reminding her that this wasn't just about her. It was about Benjamin, too, about a truth that had been denied to him for his entire life. The decision was made. They would try to meet him. But how? A direct approach felt too abrupt, too shocking. They needed a way to introduce themselves, to plant the seed of familiarity, without immediately dropping the bombshell. Elara, with her background in antique restoration, came up with a plan, perhaps a little unorthodox, but filled with a delicate hope. Benjamin Everett's architectural firm had recently undertaken a project to restore a historic landmark in their city, an old public library, a building rich with history. Elara decided to offer her services, pro bono, as an antique restoration consultant for some of the library's vintage furniture and architectural elements. It was a legitimate offer within her professional expertise and a way to gain access, to be in his orbit without raising immediate suspicion. The email she drafted was carefully worded, professional yet hinting at a genuine passion for historical preservation. She outlined her experience, her unique skills, and her desire to contribute to such a meaningful community project. Days passed in agonizing silence. Then, a reply from Benjamin Everett himself. He was intrigued by her offer and invited her to the firm's office for a meeting. Elara's heart pounded. This was it, the first step. She chose an outfit that was professional yet approachable, something that spoke of quiet competence. As she drove to the city, the old letter, still safely tucked away, felt like a silent companion, a tangible link to the extraordinary truth she carried. The meeting itself was a blur of nervous anticipation and surreal reality. Benjamin Everett was exactly as his photos depicted. Tall, distinguished, with a quiet intensity in his eyes. He greeted her with a polite, professional handshake, completely unaware of the seismic shift that was about to occur in his life. As they discussed the library project, Elara studied him, searching for any familiar flicker, any shared gesture. His hands, she noticed, were remarkably similar to hers, with the same long, slender fingers. He had a slight habit of running a hand through his hair when deep in thought, a gesture so eerily reminiscent of her own father, that a wave of fresh grief and wonder washed over her. This man, a stranger, was undeniably family. She maintained her composure, her voice steady as she outlined her restoration philosophy, her passion for preserving the past. Benjamin listened attentively, nodding occasionally, his expression unreadable. Towards the end of their conversation, as she gathered her portfolio, she decided to take a calculated risk. "Mr. Everett?" she began, her voice softer, more personal. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you bear a striking resemblance to someone I once knew." It was a vague, almost innocuous statement, designed to pique his curiosity, to open a tiny crack in the wall of their professional interaction. Benjamin paused, a slight frown creasing his brow. "Oh? And who might that be?" he asked, a hint of mild amusement in his tone. "My mother," Elara replied, holding his gaze. She was a truly remarkable woman. She could see a subtle shift in his expression, a flicker of something undefinable in his dark eyes. It was not recognition, not yet, but perhaps a seed of curiosity, a whisper of a question. She left the meeting with a tentative agreement to begin work on the library project, and a strange mixture of triumph and fear. The door was open, but only a crack. How much could she push before it slammed shut? She knew she couldn't simply hand him the letter. The shock would be too immense, the potential for rejection too great. She needed to lay more groundwork, to create a subtle bridge between their two worlds. Over the next few weeks, as Elara began her work at the library, she found small, organic ways to interact with Benjamin. He would often stop by to check on the progress, and their conversations slowly moved beyond work. She would casually mention her childhood in Willow Creek, her mother's love for gardening, for old folk songs. She even hummed the lullaby, "Sleep, my little dove, the stars are watching above," under her breath one afternoon, while polishing an old wooden desk, making sure it was just loud enough for him to potentially hear. He didn't react immediately, but Elara saw a brief, almost imperceptible hesitation in his movements, a slight pause in his casual stride. It was a fleeting moment, but enough to give her hope. One rainy afternoon, As they were sheltering from a sudden downpour inside the library, Benjamin recounted a childhood memory. "You know," he mused, looking out at the rain-swept street, "my adopted mother, bless her heart, tried to teach me to sing, but I could never carry a tune, except for one song. I don't even know where it came from, but it just always felt right." And then, almost unconsciously, he began to hum. The melody was unmistakable. The lullaby, the very same lullaby her mother had sung to her, the one she had specifically mentioned in the letter as the one she had sung to Benjamin. Elara felt a jolt so profound it nearly took her breath away. Her carefully constructed composure threatened to unravel. This wasn't just a coincidence. This was confirmation, a powerful, emotional anchor connecting them across decades of separation. "That's beautiful," Elara managed, her voice thick with emotion she desperately tried to suppress. "I know that song. My mother used to sing it to me too." Benjamin looked at her then, truly looked at her, his dark eyes filled with a dawning curiosity, a flicker of something akin to surprise. "Really?" he asked, his voice softer now, tinged with genuine interest. "It's a very old folk song, I believe. I never knew its origins." This was her moment. The bridge had been built. The shared memory, the shared lullaby was too potent to ignore. "It is," Elara confirmed, her gaze steady, full of a carefully controlled intensity. "And there's something else, Benjamin. Something about our mothers. Something I think you need to know." The air in the old library grew heavy, pregnant with the weight of impending revelation. Benjamin's expression shifted, from curiosity to a dawning realization, a subtle tightening around his eyes as if he sensed the gravity of her words. The next chapter, the true unveiling, was upon them. The old library, usually a sanctuary of quiet wisdom, now thrummed with an almost unbearable tension. Benjamin Everett stood across from Elara, his initial curiosity replaced by a deep-seated apprehension, a subtle guard rising in his posture. He was a man accustomed to order, to logic, to building structures that stood firm against the elements. The unpredictable, emotionally charged truth Elara was about to unleash threatened to dismantle the very foundation of his life. "What are you talking about, Elara?" he asked, his voice tight, though tinged with a tremor he couldn't quite conceal. Elara took a deep breath, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. This was it, the moment she had rehearsed in her mind 1,000 times, yet felt completely unprepared for. She reached into her bag, her fingers fumbling slightly as she withdrew the yellowed envelope, the brittle letter tucked safely inside. "This," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "this came to me in a way I never expected. It belonged to my mother, and it speaks of a life, a connection, that neither of us ever knew existed." She extended the envelope, her hand steady despite the inner turmoil. Benjamin took it, his brow furrowed, his gaze fixed on the faded script of Elara Vance on the front. He looked up at her, a question forming in his eyes. "My mother," Elara clarified, her voice gaining strength now, fueled by a deep sense of purpose. "Eleanor Vance. She was your mother too, Benjamin." The words hung in the air, echoing off the high ceilings of the library. Benjamin's face, usually so composed, crumpled slightly. Disbelief, then confusion, then a dawning, terrible understanding washed over him. He looked at the envelope, then at Elara, then back at the envelope as if trying to reconcile the impossible. He opened it slowly, his fingers tracing the fragile paper. As he began to read, his posture stiffened, his shoulders drawing back as if bracing against an invisible blow. Elara watched him, every line of his body screaming with the shock of discovery. She saw the moments of disbelief, then a flicker of pain, a profound sadness that mirrored her own. She saw his eyes dart to the faded photograph of the infant, then back to the words, absorbing the devastating truth of his adoption, the sacrifice, the decades of secrecy. A long, agonizing silence settled between them, broken only by the distant hum of city traffic. When Benjamin finally looked up, his eyes were clouded with unshed tears, but also with a raw, undeniable hunger for answers. My parents, he began, his voice hoarse. They always said I was adopted. They never lied about that. But they never spoke of this, of another family, of a biological mother who truly loved me. His voice broke on the last words. Elara nodded, tears stinging her own eyes. She did, Benjamin, more than words can say. She carried this secret, this pain, every single day of her life. She loved you so much that she risked everything to give you a chance at a better life, a life she couldn't provide. She then shared the story of the house in Willow Creek, the forgotten letter behind the wallpaper, the meticulous clues her mother had left. She spoke of Agnes Pritchard's role, the ceramic birdbath, the lullaby. Each detail, each piece of the puzzle, painted a picture of a mother's enduring love and desperate hope for reunion. Benjamin listened, his expression a mixture of profound shock and a dawning, almost overwhelming understanding. The memories of his childhood, the slight differences he had always felt from his adoptive parents, the unexplained melodies he hummed, all suddenly clicked into place, illuminated by the harsh, brilliant light of truth. He reached into his wallet, pulling out a faded, almost crumbling photograph, a picture of him as a toddler, standing next to the ceramic birdbath in his adoptive parents' garden. "This," he whispered, holding it out. "This was always my favorite spot. I never knew why. The coincidence was too profound to be anything but destiny." The conversation that followed was long, difficult, and punctuated by tears and revelations. Benjamin spoke of his loving adoptive parents, the comfort and stability they had provided. He admitted to a lifelong, subtle feeling of being different, a quiet longing for answers about his origins that he had long suppressed. The anger, when it came, was not directed at his adoptive family, but at the sheer magnitude of the secret, at the years stolen, at the opportunity for connection that had been denied. But beneath the anger, a deeper, more powerful emotion surged. A profound sense of gratitude to his biological mother for her courage, for her sacrifice, and for her final, heartbreaking act of love in revealing the truth. And beneath that, a blossoming, tentative hope for a future with a sister he never knew he had. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their lives, discovering countless small connections, shared traits, and uncanny similarities. Their love for old books, their shared quiet determination, a particular way they both tilted their heads when listening intently. It was as if decades of separate existences were suddenly collapsing, forming a new, shared narrative. The initial shock slowly gave way to a burgeoning sense of connection, a fragile, yet powerful bond. The sister who had been kept a secret, and the brother who had been unaware, were finally, irrevocably, reunited. The weight of the world, for Elara, lifted. The years of unspoken questions, of a subtle, indefinable emptiness she hadn't even known she carried, were finally filled. For Benjamin, a void he hadn't known existed was suddenly being embraced. Their meeting at the library marked not an end, but a profound new beginning. It was the first chapter of a newly written book, a story of two siblings, separated by circumstance and secrecy, now bound by an unbreakable tie of shared blood and a mother's enduring love. They decided to take things slowly, to allow their relationship to grow organically, to respect the established lives they both led. But the commitment to building that relationship was unwavering. They met frequently, sometimes in the quiet corners of the library, sometimes at Elara's renovated house, which now felt less like a renovation project and more like a sacred place of discovery. Thomas, ever supportive, watched with quiet joy as his wife found a missing piece of her soul, and as a new member, Benjamin, quietly, gracefully, began to weave himself into the fabric of their family. The story of the forgotten letter behind the wallpaper quickly became a powerful testament to the enduring power of family, the surprising ways in which truth can find its way to the surface, and the profound impact of a mother's selfless love. It was a story of heartbreak and redemption, of a past that shaped the present, and a future suddenly brimming with unexpected connections. And it reminds us all that sometimes, the greatest discoveries aren't in grand expeditions or scientific breakthroughs, but in the quiet, unassuming corners of our own lives, waiting patiently to be found. The journey of Elara and Benjamin reminds us that truth, no matter how deeply buried, often finds its way to the surface, weaving new threads into the tapestry of our lives. It's a powerful testament to the enduring bonds of family and the quiet strength of love that transcends time and distance. If this incredible story touched your heart, if it left you wondering about the hidden narratives in your own life, please take a moment to give this video a like to help us share it with more people. And if you want to keep exploring these profound and often astonishing real-life tales, make sure to subscribe to our channel right now and turn on those notification bells so you'll never miss another captivating story from us. Your support means the world, and it allows us to continue bringing these incredible human experiences to light. Thank you for watching.